All right, we are now recording the use of Viveza on this image north of Quito, Ecuador. So I'm going to filter, Nick Collection, Viveza2. It opens my image in Viveza2. And this is a small file I gave you, so it's already at 100%. It isn't, if you put your own image in here, you'll have a small version of a huge file. This just is a small one I gave. And now we go back and we see the controls again. And so you can do some work globally on an image if you think it will help. Like this image could probably afford to have some overall contrast added to it. So let's just see what happens. Here, global is the word. That means anything I do is going to be applied equally to the whole image. So let's add a little bit of contrast to that image and see if that helps me. I'm going to add a little bit of brightness to it till I think that the basic image looks better to me. And maybe I even have too much contrast. So I'm applying about 10% brightness and 10% contrast globally to the entire image. Now, you've got to be careful. If I had a sky that was approaching overexposure, I would never globally add brightness to this image because it would overexpose the sky. But I had a sky that had enough space in it that I could add a little brightness. But the big trick here is to use control points. And I have given you, I don't know if I gave you the controls. Well, if I didn't give you the information and you weren't here before, when I send out stuff to follow up, I'll see that you get my Viveza handouts, because I'm not sure whether I gave them to you on the flash drive today. So relax, you'll get more material to help. So a control point is unique in Nick software. When I click on this little control point button and pick it up, come over the picture, I want to work on the clouds, which I think could be a lot more dramatic. I'm going to bring my mouse over and look at that little mark I'm in. That's a control point. And I'm going to place it in the clouds over here to the left of center by clicking. And when I do that, I give all of these adjustments here right on the screen with it. And I have a choice when I adjust it whether I want to work from these little sliders or these bigger ones. They do the same. And once you put a control point down, look what happens over here. We don't have the word global anymore. We have the word selective. This means that the changes now will be applied only to the control. Okay, folks, over here. Look up. Thanks, Tom. Here it is. See it here?
Where's here?
Oh, over in the right, in the black panel, next to the word selective, tells you, do you want all or part of them?
Thank you.
So it says expand all sliders, and it says the E key will do it. So if you're a keyboard person, you've got a trick. All right. The first thing I want to do is to say to you, this control point is unique. It's looking at texture and tonality. It's not like cloning where you pick up everything. It's looking in this area for what is under this control point. And across the point, there is a little slider that makes the control point large or small. So I'm going to bring it just about right for that area on the left. And if I want to move my control point a little, I can do so. But I want you to know what happens under a control point is that the effect is strongest under the point and fades out as the circle goes away from the point. So it isn't abrupt. It doesn't mean that if I set it here, that it'll all stop at the other side of that circle. It fades out gradually. And I want you to come over to the right panel. And you see the slider here? Over here at the right, look up at the screen. Grab the slider and bring it down until you see a control point in orange. This is the information about the point that I clicked on. And If you look across at it, it says it's covering about 14% of the image. And then there is an empty black box. Click in the black box, and it shows you the area under the control of the control point. It says, what did it do? It picked up the clouds. Did it pick up the foreground? No. It mostly picked up what was under the point. Now, to understand it better, grab the point and move it. And watch it follow the point. Wherever you put the point, it's reading what is there. And I can expand it while I'm looking at it. Oh, look at that. I can expand it bigger or smaller. And what I like about this little black box is I actually see what part of the image is going to change.
What are you making your control point bigger and smaller?
The right opposite the point is a little bar. But your questions are great because this is when you need to ask them. Okay, now, I'm going to tell you in a minute. When I'm done, I can eliminate the effect from this part of the sky. You see the mountain here is partly affected? I can eliminate it afterward. But what's important is it emphasizing the clouds? And it certainly is. Come back over to the orange writing and get rid of that black box check so you go back to the image. In other words, I want to see the image as it changes. So I want to add structure to the clouds so they're not so blah. I can either work on this little bar here or the one over here. I personally prefer working at the right because it makes more sense to me. If I drag the little triangle to the right, I get added structure. You see the 0%? If I go to the right, I'm adding structure to the clouds. And if I go to the left, I'm taking away structure. And I want you to see what it did here. The rule here is, if you go away from the vertical bar, you're adding something. You see how it went away? If you move these points closer to the vertical bar, you're in the negative, you're taking it away. Over here is the same thing. To the right, you see I have 27% added structure. I can add a little more. And then I want to know, what did I do to the image? If I only want to see what happened with the structure that is in the control point, I come down to the orange. And I hide the control point. Do you see the left check? That says I'm using the control point. Click it off, and it goes back to the original. Now, to do this, you've got to put your mouse there, but look at your image. Can you see how it changed the clouds? I'm going to go on and off. And if I don't think that's enough structure, I add more, till I get what I think is a more interesting sky. If I use my preview button, I turn off all of the adjustments that I've applied, which means I turn off the global ones too. So sometimes you only want to see what you did with that one control point. And the way to turn off that one control point is down here with that check mark. Can you see how I changed the sky? Now, what about this part of the sky over here? If I want to have the same changes over there, I want to copy my point. And there's a really easy way to do it.
Can you change the circle to a rectangle?
No.
Okay.
There is no such thing as a rectangle. It's always going to be, it's going to be strong in the middle and fade away on the edges. That's why it's a circle. Now, if I want to copy this point and put it over there, all I have to do is hold the Alt or Option key down and drag the point to the right and let go. It copies it and lets me move it. I'm going to undo that and do it again. Okay, here's my first control point. I want the identical control point over at the right. I hold the Alt Option key, drag that point to the right, and let go. I've made a copy and I've put it over at the right. So now the entire set of clouds have been changed. Now be aware, right now, those are identical settings. I can change the one I copied. If I decide that I like the strong structure here, but I want less here, I can change this one slightly. Once I've copied and duplicated it, I can change it. I don't want to, but if I wanted to change that, I could work with this as new point once it's here. But I wanted to duplicate it so it looked consistent across. So at this point, if I don't want this crazy thing sticking at me down here, if I click on the outside gray area, it gets rid of all those extra bars that are in the way. And now I want to go back to my beginning when I first opened it. So how do I go all the way back to the beginning? I go to the preview at the top, and I'm going to uncheck it. There's the original image. Here's all of the changes. If I want to see just the control points, then I have to come down here and activate them. Can you see where those orange text is? Do I want both control points active? If I hold down my Shift key, I can make both points active. Okay? And now I can turn them both off. I won't change my global adjustments, will I? I'm only going to turn off what I did to the clouds. So here it is, the check in front. Here's the way it looked before I had the control points activated. Now, turn them back on with the check. And that's what I did with the sky. So in many skies that you know have contrast, they have shadows in them, but you would like to make it more important in the overall image, going into Viveza and putting control points over the clouds and adding structure is a way, because are there midtones in the clouds? Yeah, there are, aren't they? Your shadows in your clouds are almost always made up of midtones. And midtones are what are changed when you add structure. Okay? Let me show you what the question was raised before. Click off the picture. The comment was made that maybe I got some effect here and I didn't want it on that part. The way you eliminate the effect upon this section is to add a new control point. That means come back up on your scroll bar to the top. And this will be a new point with no adjustment. If I add it to these mountains and I eliminate it so it's just the mountains that are covered by it, it will erase any existing control point that's on that section. That didn't make much difference in this. But there are images where it drips over into part of your picture and you don't like the effect on that part. If you add a new control point just to the area that you want to eliminate, it dumps it off. How do we know it did that? Can you come back to the orange type by scrolling down on this column? If you will, you see control point 3 is this one we just added? Do you see that blank section at the right where you applied it, that little, click it. This is where it worked, strictly in that area. Okay, now watch with me. We're going to see what it did to the image. Turn on control point 1, Shift key, control point 2. Okay? And activate control point 3. All three are active. Now, if you go over, no, that doesn't do what I want. Actually, maybe it does. Hold on a second. If I push the right button for control point 1 and 2, and here's 3. If I get rid of 3, Can you see how dark that area is? That means I took that area out of this original selection. If I turn it off, can you look at how it was chosen before? When I added that control point, I knocked out the changes in that area. And I could go ahead and enlarge that control point and knock out more of that area. If I have it bigger, it's knocked out that whole area that was affected by the original. So a new control point acts like an eraser. It's a plain, untouched control point with no adjustments. And wherever you apply it, it erases all the adjustments that were in that area before. And why does it not change it up here? Because this control point is reading the texture of this mountain. And this control point is reading the texture of the clouds. And this did not carry into the clouds. It simply worked down here. Okay.
So it's working based on the edges, whereas the two up in the clouds are overlapping each other and not blocking each other.
They're not blocking because they're identical. When I did these, I made these both have the same. I have to activate that one. If I activate these two here, I'm having trouble making it show me what's wrong. There it is. Okay, I use the command or control key, not the shift. If I look at those two, I can see their area.
So you're saying that they affect one another?
All I did was stretch this adjustment to reach further.
Right.
And then I eliminated all of that change from the mountain. Because it had not, actually, folks, I wouldn't have had to do that. It didn't have much effect on the mountain.
But you're saying the upper two, because they're, one's a copy of the other?
Yes, they're identical.
And that's why they don't block each other out?
That's right. They don't block because they're identical.
Okay.
You're right. That's a good point. They're identical, so they have the same controls in them. Let's go back to seeing the image. It's a little hard to see the other. So actually, it was commented that how would you get rid of it if it hit the wrong thing? So that's how you would get rid of it. I don't think it mattered to me a great deal whether or not I added this one. But if you want to eliminate it from an area, you add a new control point. Okay?
Could you put some kind of a mask in there later and just mask it out, like if you went back to Photoshop?
Yeah, you could do it here. It has the same thing. I personally don't use brush because it's too many extra steps. I always say, let's take our image now back into Adobe by clicking OK. Yes, you could certainly do that, and you could mask it out. But it's quite easy while you've got those control points to make very fine control over where they work. And I want you to understand that the circle of a control point doesn't mean that everything in that circle is equally covered. It means the things that match the texture and tonality of the point are included. So if it goes over an area that's totally different, it won't have any effect on that area. If it reaches from the clouds into a black area, there won't be any effect because it's not the same as what's under the control point. In this case,
So if you had like a portrait and you had a background that was very different,
Yeah.
obviously, so you could cover the whole image and it
Yeah.
would really only affect where you had started.
that's right. Where you put the control point, it reads what's there. And if you have an area very different, it isn't going to affect it. Yeah. So I think that Viveza, of all my things that I play with in Nick, I like this as the most of all the Nick software because I'm in control. I don't go over to the left and say, let's see, this guy has a neat preset. I'm going to click on, ooh, that's neat. But that's his preset. Whereas I want to have my personal interpretation of an image. And Viveza lets me decide how to present that image. There's nothing wrong with using those presets, but realize they're not your personal interpretation. Unless you take one and then change it. When you get presets, you can always go in there and, whoa, change them a lot afterward, which makes them more personal. I just happen to like Viveza. So this is an example where this image worked very well. It had midtones, but it also had contrast. So it's an image that we could also add sharpness to. Now, I probably wouldn't, but let's do it. You've got the image open in front of you? Let's go and let's make a copy of this so we're not touching the Viveza layer. Command or Control J or layer, duplicate layer, either will do the same. Now we have a copy of our work. Let's add some Enhance Unsharp Mask or Filter Sharpen Unsharp Mask for Photoshop users. And let's see what happens to it when we add sharpness. Now it's going to pick up all of the edges throughout the entire image where there is a dark and light intersection, and it's going to accentuate those edges, and that's what makes it sharp. So you can see right away what that percentage did. And how do I turn it off? Preview. Can you see it? So you might like to add, there's nothing wrong with adding sharpness. Be careful you don't overdo sharpness to the point where you get these horrible halos around the edges that are dark and light. This point here, this sharpens fine, and if you like it, then you've got it. If you don't want the background as sharp as the foreground, then sharpness is going to have a mask, isn't it? Everything is equally sharpened. If you like the fading out view where it gets less sharp in the distance, then you're going to have to add a mask to this work that you've done, because everything is equally sharpened when you use the Unsharp Mask, unless you mask it and partially remove the sharpness, which you can do.